For more than 70 years, the Bermuda Triangle has stood as one of the world's most enduring mysteries. Stretching roughly between Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, this region of the Atlantic Ocean has long been associated with unexplained disappearances, strange signals, and stories that seem to belong more to legend than to reality. Ships sailing through these waters have vanished without sending distress calls. Aircraft flying overhead have lost contact with control towers and were never seen again. Pilots reported instruments spinning out of control, while sailors described sudden fog, strange lights, and waters that seemed calm one moment and violent the next. Over time, these reports built a reputation that made the Bermuda Triangle famous across the world. Scientists, investigators, and journalists tried to find logical explanations, suggesting storms, human error, methane gas eruptions, or magnetic anomalies. Yet no single theory ever managed to explain every case. Because of this, the triangle became more than just a place on the map. It became a symbol of the unknown, a region where the normal rules of nature did not always seem to apply. For decades, the stories remained mostly in books, documentaries, and eyewitness accounts. Many people believed the truth would never be known because the ocean is vast, deep, and difficult to study. Even with modern technology, only a small part of the seafloor has ever been mapped in detail. This means that countless wrecks, natural formations, and forgotten histories still lie hidden beneath the water. By the late 20th century, however, new scanning equipment made it possible to explore the ocean floor more accurately than ever before. Companies searching for oil, minerals, or shipwrecks began using advanced sonar systems that could create detailed images of the terrain far below the surface. These tools were not designed to investigate mysteries. They were built for business, for locating resources, and for mapping areas that had never been surveyed before. That is why what happened in the early 2000s surprised even the professionals who were involved. Around that time, a Canadian deep-sea exploration company signed an agreement with the Cuban government for a practical and very ordinary reason. Cuba was interested in the possibility of recovering valuable cargo from old shipwrecks that lay in its surrounding waters. For centuries, Spanish ships had traveled through the Caribbean carrying gold, silver, and other treasures from the Americas back to Europe. Many of those ships never completed the journey. Hurricanes, battles, and navigation errors caused hundreds of vessels to sink, and historians believed that large amounts of valuable cargo were still resting on the seabed. The agreement between the company and the government was simple. The company would use modern scanning technology to search the ocean floor, locate wrecks, and identify anything worth recovering. If valuable artifacts were found, both sides would benefit. There was no plan to investigate legends, and no interest in proving or disproving stories about the Bermuda Triangle. The mission was commercial, technical, and focused entirely on data. The work began like most deep-sea surveys do, slow and repetitive. A research ship moved back and forth across the water in long, careful lines, pulling sonar equipment behind it. This equipment sent sound waves down to the ocean floor and measured how those waves bounced back. Because light cannot travel far underwater, sound is the most reliable way to see at great depth. On the monitors inside the ship, the crew watched the results appear as gray and black images showing mud, rocks, and uneven ground. Most of the time the pictures looked dull and confusing, filled with shapes that meant nothing special. This is normal in ocean mapping. The seabed is rarely smooth, and natural formations usually look random. Days passed with nothing unusual appearing on the screens. The team expected this. In deep-sea work, it is common to spend weeks scanning empty terrain before finding anything interesting. Then, during one of these routine passes, something appeared that did not match the patterns they were used to seeing. At first it looked like a small error in the image, a bright line where there should have been only dark mud. The operator adjusted the settings, thinking the signal had been distorted. But the line did not disappear. Instead, more lines appeared beside it, long, straight, and unusually clear. The ship turned and passed over the same area again from a different angle. The shapes were still there. This time the crew slowed the survey and watched carefully as the sonar traced the bottom once more. The bright areas formed shapes that looked organized, almost as if the ground itself had been arranged in a pattern. In deep water, that is not something you expect to see. Natural rock formations can be strange, but they rarely form long straight edges that repeat over and over. To make sure the equipment was not malfunctioning, the crew changed the scanning strength and speed. They checked the cables, the computer system, and the sonar unit itself. Everything worked normally. When the scan was repeated again, the result was the same. The images showed objects rising from the seabed, casting shadows behind them. That detail was important because shadows only appear when something has height. Flat sand cannot create them. Whatever was down there was solid and standing above the ground. The team compared the shapes with known shipwreck patterns, coral reefs, and natural rock fields. Shipwrecks usually appear broken and scattered, with pieces spread by currents. Coral grows in curves and irregular clusters. These shapes were different. They looked straight, heavy, and evenly spaced, as if placed deliberately. By this point, the crew realized that the sonar images alone were not enough to explain what they were seeing. The only way to be sure was to look directly at the site. That meant sending a remotely operated underwater vehicle down to the bottom. This was not part of the original plan, but the discovery was too unusual to ignore. The robot they prepared was designed for deep water work, with strong cables, bright lights, and cameras that could function in total darkness. Before lowering it, the engineers checked every system carefully. At great depth, the pressure is strong enough to crush ordinary equipment, and losing the robot would end the investigation. When everything was ready, the machine was lowered slowly into the sea, the cable unrolling behind it as it sank. At first the camera showed blue water and small fish passing by. Then the light faded as the robot descended deeper. After a few hundred meters, the sunlight disappeared completely, leaving only darkness. The only things visible were the particles drifting through the water like dust in the air. Finally, at around 700 meters, the seabed came into view. The crew expected to see uneven ground covered in mud. Instead, large flat surfaces appeared on the screen. As the robot moved closer, sharp edges came into focus. Massive blocks lay side by side, their faces smooth and their corners clean. They did not look like loose stones. They looked solid, heavy, and placed close together. The camera passed over lines of these blocks, some several meters wide, arranged in ways that seemed too regular to be random. The footage raised more questions than answers. In that part of the Caribbean, the natural rock is mostly limestone, a soft material that erodes easily and usually forms rough shapes. The blocks on the screen looked harder, more like granite, which forms deep underground under intense heat. Even more strange was the fact that the edges were still visible. At such depth, fine mud slowly falls from above and covers anything left on the seabed. Over thousands of years, thick layers should bury old structures completely. Yet many of these blocks were still exposed, as if they had not been there long enough to be covered, or as if something had protected them from erosion. When geologists studied the data, they could not agree on a single explanation. Some believed the shapes might be natural formations created by unusual geological activity. Others thought the patterns looked too ordered to be accidental. The greatest mystery came from the depth itself. If the blocks had once been on land, the area would have had to sink hundreds of meters. In this region, changes like that normally take tens of thousands of years. But according to accepted history, humans living that long ago did not build large stone structures. They were small groups of hunters and gatherers using simple tools. That makes the discovery difficult to explain. A few scientists suggested that a sudden earthquake or land collapse could have caused the area to drop quickly into the sea, preserving whatever was there before erosion could destroy it. Even so, no theory managed to answer every question. The shapes looked organized, but the age seemed impossible. In the end, the site was never fully explored. The depth made further work expensive and risky, and the original project was meant to search for shipwrecks, not to solve historical mysteries. What remains today is a collection of sonar scans, video footage, and reports describing something unusual resting on the ocean floor near the waters often linked to the Bermuda Triangle. Whether the formation was created by nature or by human hands long forgotten is still unknown. What makes the discovery so unsettling is not only what was seen, but what still cannot be explained. The ocean covers most of our planet, and much of it remains unexplored. Hidden beneath the water may be pieces of history that do not fit what we think we know. Until someone returns to that dark place 700 meters below the surface, the question will remain open, waiting in silence on the floor of the sea.